Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you. We're very grateful that so many people have come here to think about this big word of dignity. My father was a rich man in a rich country, and when his body began to fail him, he had resources lavished upon that body of medical expertise, technology, and skill that we would all hope to receive when we need it. That we know that many people do not get such a chance. He was also, though, an incredibly stubborn man, and he would get into fights with the nurses. And when he did, they would respond by withdrawing another element of the care. They would still do their jobs with great skill. All the technology was in place, all the expertise was in place, but they would withdraw the human element. And it was, I think, a source of great pain to him in the care he was receiving towards the end of his life, that he would be acted upon as a body, as an object, rather than as a full, complex human. He was, as I say, pretty stubborn. I'm sure some part of this was his fault. Uh, but even when the medical care, even when the material aid that an institution offers an individual is of the highest quality, leaving out dignity can still be this deeply, ruinously painful experience. Samantha Power, in a speech about 18 months ago now, said, wherever the heart beats, wherever the human heart beats, it beats for dignity. That is the right intention. I'm really glad that somebody who holds such power is saying that and advocating for that. But we know equally that that is, at the moment, an intention of development and humanitarian aid and the ways in which charities and governments operate. At best, it's an intention. There are plenty of organizations and institutions that haven't even managed to register it as an intention. But even when organizations come with the most incredible intentions, one of the participants in a participatory research project we did in Mathare, a very tough neighborhood in northern Nairobi, said, we wish we could have this respect. Unfortunately, these things only happen to the rich people. There remains this gap between intention and action, between skill and care. And what I hope we're going to talk about today is not just why this is important, why this is a wonderful concept, although it is. Not just why this benefits, why respectful care or respectful treatment of people is valuable in itself, not just why it brings other downstream benefits, although it does, but also how to do it. These ideas of dignity, these ideas, big values that we talk about in international development and humanitarian aid and democratic practice, are relatively easy to say. They're relatively easy to put in report titles and speeches. The UN Secretary General, when he was inaugurated, when he first his very first speech as UN Secretary General, he said, human dignity will be the core of my work. And yet, is the experience of receiving help from UNDP all that much different now than it was when he began his term? I don't think it is. I want us to focus then in this discussion on what's actually possible, that these are not merely warm words, that there are organizations out there, peers of many of the organizations in this room, who have really struggled and wrestled to build cultures of dignity. And our panel today are going to talk about some of the hard trade-offs of that. This was not an easy journey for any of them, but also going to talk about what practically did they do? What difference did it seem to make to them? And what I hope we will be able to take away from this is, for each of your organizations, some steps that you might take, either to build a culture of dignity in your own organization or among the organizations you support and partner with. This idea that wherever the human heart beats, it beats for dignity is true. Our research has shown in Nigeria, in India, in the United States, in Kenya, in Uganda. I think we've done some 30 or 40 studies by now in all different countries across the world. People continually tell us that they care about dignity, that this matters to them. So let us begin then with that democratic impulse. If the people of the world tell us this matters to them, then let us feed it into our practices, our habits, our cultures in a way that goes beyond our value statements, our missions, and our websites. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to welcome you all here today and to invite up our panel.
Thanks so much, Tom. Wow, what a full room. This is so exciting to be here at UNGA and to host a panel on a topic near and dear to our hearts. I want to thank our panelists for taking the time to come here and share their wisdom with us. I will be giving brief introductions of each of them, too brief, and I would love for each of them to tell you all a little bit more about their backgrounds and work as we begin. But first, I'll introduce myself. I am Becca Gong Sharp, the CEO of IDinsight, which is hosting this event and also the Dignity Initiative, which Tom leads for us at IDinsight. And some of you may ask, you know, what is the relationship between IDinsight and why are we hosting this event and why do we care about this? And you know, for those who don't know us, we are a data and evidence organization that uses rigorous tools to improve social impact for global development practitioners. And as Tom said so eloquently, oftentimes that is about measuring outcomes. That is about thinking about the technical implementation and rigor and counterfactual attribution of impact to programs. Oftentimes that is about thinking about, you know, whether people's lives have been lengthened due to quality healthcare, whether children learn more due to educational programs. But somewhere embedded in the research community also has been a history, right, of not paying adequate attention, exactly as Tom said, to the dignity of the humans that our programs are trying to serve. And research and distilling people into numbers is not always holistically representative of what we care about as a sector. And so I think for IDinsight to sort of take the stance that as a research community, as a technical community, we need to do better. And we need to, exactly as Tom was saying, put our values into action. And some of you may or may not know that the Dignity Initiative at IDinsight is a set of measurement tools. And so it is very, very in line with how do we actually not just talk about this and its importance, but how do we measure it and make sure that we do it? So there's a very interesting dignity self-assessment that some of you may know about that you can access on IDinsight's website, and Tom can share. I think there's a QR code on some of these posters that you can check out. It's a free tool, actually, for you to do a little bit of that first step and for us to all make sure that we are enacting the things that really matter to us. So I wanted to start with that brief preamble, and now I want to do an introduction to our wonderful speakers. First, I'll just go in order. We have Anshu Gupta, the founder of Goonj. Goonj works at scale, and Goonj is in its 25th year now. Congratulations, Anshu. Those of us who are social entrepreneurs know what a feat it is to hit your 25-year anniversary. It's really exciting. They now serve 27 Indian states. Goonj gives cloth and work to build an equitable relationship between the resourceful and the resourceless. So thank you so much for being here. We also have Cate Oswald, Principal Chief Program Officer at Partners in Health. Cate is a nearly 20-year veteran of Partners in Health, having worked in Haiti, Liberia, and Boston. Partners in Health, as many of you might know, has spread to 11 countries now, bringing deep moral purpose to these issues that we're talking about of how to put dignity into health services. So look forward to hearing more from you, Cate. And then we have Rakesh Rajani, known to many in this room as the president of JustSystems. Rakesh, his first, let's say, part of his career was as also a founder of several remarkable East African community-based organizations, Kuliana, Haki Elimu, Twaweza. And might I say, the second part of his career has been as a funder at Ford Co-Impact and now at JustSystems, for which dignity is a core pillar of their work. So really, really excited to hear from these three panelists. The first question I'll pose to you all, and feel free when you respond to also say a little bit more about your work and background for the audience. But the first question I'll pose is really the one that Tom posed to us earlier, which is, how can we move from words and sentiments to action? And what are the actionable pieces of advice that you have to all of the social impact practitioners in this room about how to live and measure and realize their ambitions to embed dignity into their work? So we'll start with you, Anshu.
Thank you for inviting. So, if I go back to my childhood, I think if you see in a country like India and many other countries, almost every single kid, his or her mother, the first lesson is that if you go to neighboring auntie, okay, and if she offers you a chocolate, don't take it. And then she says, if you take it once, don't take it again. And if you take it, say thank you. And then you end up in a world where the kid has become the biggest victim of charity. Not my own kid, but someone else's kid. I mean, you don't even take a minute to offer something which is left over to the kid of someone. And one question which we have been asking for the last 25 years is, how long will we sell poverty to remove poverty? Why do we need a naked kid or a kid who does not have clothes to sell the concept? And then you grow up. I mean, I remember I was about 20 years old when a massive disaster happened in the mountains of India. And like a budding journalist, I just picked up my camera, a small camera, and went there. Morning, only 2 conversations used to happen on a small tea shop. First conversation is about how many aftershocks happened, tremors happened, universe. Second, how sad people were to receive the relief material which has gone from all across. Because the second victim of charity is the person in the mountain, or the person who had his or her own house and was living a very beautiful, dignified life, never asked for something, but then a disaster happened, which is so common in the world. And suddenly the word which we use is a disaster victim. and we don't even take a minute to give away even our old youth undergarment because we think that person is a victim. And I still remember as a 20 years old, Rebecca, that how much pain they were in every day. That we are, I mean, disaster has already taken away dignity of people. Large number of people are homeless. You do not have even a safe place to sleep or safe place to change clothes. And then you get this relief material which is challenging everything. I would say that was the genesis of our understanding that why it is important to keep that respect intact. How the sustained charity is ultimately killing dignity of people. I'm not talking about instant charity. I'm talking about sustained charity. And without dignity, how do you talk about development? Everyone is talking about dignity, but how many of us are really, really practicing it? That's the most important subject. So if I see our journey in the last 25 years, we started working on a very basic issue of clothing. And I remember in my early days again, meeting a family of Habib Bhai, his name used to be, and his full-time job used to actually pick up unclaimed dead bodies for the local police. Fine, like any other big city, our city also has sizable chunk of homeless people. And the debate happened that why do you call them homeless? They're actually not homeless in our country. They have a home, say, about 400 kilometers away from there. They're not homeless. They're homeless in the city. But otherwise, they have a home. Because we didn't take care of those people at the root in the villages, they're forced to migrate. I am also migrated, but I migrated by choice. And those millions of people migrate in compulsion. So many of them die. And this person, Habib Bhai, used to pick up the dead body for the local police. And say about 3 decades back, he was paid 20 rupees, which is not even quarter of a dollar, and 2 meters of white cloth. Right? And then when he started talking about that how in winters he has more dead bodies and in summers much lesser. And then his little daughter who gave the most shocking statement by saying that when I feel cold, I hug the dead body and sleep because it does not trouble me, it does not turn around. Very shocking for sure. And I also thought that it is because of cold people are dying. And then suddenly you realize that if the cold kills people, even I would have died. If I survive, someone else dies. It's not cold, but lack of clothing. And why I'm, sharing this story. So anyway, we started working on cloth. I'll give you a minute, and explain what we are trying to do. But more important, whether the person is rich or poor, educated or uneducated, cultured or uncultured, upper caste, lower caste, or any kind of division. Unfortunately, we try to identify with a piece of cloth. So a professor who is well-read, much better, bigger, deeper than us, if that person is not wearing proper clothes, and that proper also, that person cannot decide, I will decide what is proper and what is not proper. Even that right that person does not have. We decide. So we are dictating all the time. That professor will not even get an entry in this hall if that person is wearing some not so proper cloth, again decided by us. So we wanted to change this dynamics in the entire world. We wanted to make a dent on this language and lenses. We wanted to take sustained charity head on. Okay, that charity is a beautiful subject for the doer of it. And I'm not doubting on intentions of anybody. Fine, don't take me wrong. All these good work happens with the good intentions only. I mean, if the intentions are not good, why would you go in the slum and try to do it? Yeah. But I think it is the way we do it. Are we valuing the person? Are we valuing the person as a fellow human being? So a lot of people now come and they say, Goonj gives dignity to people. We feel good. It's a good statement, to put a headline. But then you say, how do you give dignity to someone? Dignity is something with which you are born. It's a part of our soul. All of us are born in the same way. Then the society comes and start telling us whether we are rich or poor, upper caste, black, white, fat, thin, whatever. So we always say that dignity is a part of soul. We cannot give dignity to people. We can challenge or we can respect. That is it. So the moment you make them a stakeholder, you value people for what they are as it is to start with, not on the basis of acquired something. You value dignity of people. And the moment you do not respect that, and you only judge people on the basis of acquired something, you challenge that. And in a line, what we are doing, very simple, we collect this second-hand, underutilized, unused material from the society, cloth, utensil, footwear to carpet and windows and everything. Unfortunately, second-hand used material, it is called donation. It is not a donation. It's a discard because we are giving it because we don't need it. So we have to change that thinking, and we have to be thankful to every single person who is using our second-hand or pre-used material, because that person is the keeper of our emotions. That person is the keeper of our hard-earned money, which we have spent on that, or maybe time to make sure that this shirt none of my friend has, when I buy it. So that person is the keeper of it. So we bring this material by breaking this myth of the people, sort in a very decent way, because the biggest problem with the donation mindset is that we give what we have, we don't give what people need. We correct that. Then it goes to thousands of villages of India right now, and now we are spreading all across, where no one will be given it free of cost, will not charge money. People will pay back in labor. People will pay back in wisdom. So it's a hardcore, very large scale economic model, where on one side it is the underutilized material of the society. On the other side, it is the problem of the society. So someone wants to work on, say, recreating ponds, someone wants to revive the well, someone wants to make a bamboo bridge or a road. Hundreds and thousands of those hardcore water, sanitation, infrastructure, now called climate, work. That's the new language which has come in the last 10 years, but we are doing for the last 25 years. So you work and then you receive it. So charity is gone. You receive it, and say if I give you a shirt and come tomorrow say this shirt belongs to me, you'll say yes, it is yours. But then you make a road for your own betterment. I come and say this shirt belongs to me. You will challenge me and say it might be yours. I want it. For me, that is dignity. Thank you. I'll stop.
Wow. Thank you, Anshu. Such powerful comments. We give what we have, not what people want. That's going to stick with me a while. Cate, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your storytelling. I think I resonate so much with what Tom and Rebecca and you said, because so many times we are in global health and development forced to document our work in numbers, and it's essential for us to be holding ourselves to certain indicators and standards, but those numbers have stories behind them. And for me personally, working with Partners in Health the last 20 years, when I started, we were already 20 years old. We're about 40 years old as an organization, and we were founded to support a small community of displaced farmers in rural Haiti who had been robbed of their land through a development project, a well-intentioned IDB-funded project to bring hydroelectric power to the capital city of Port-au-Prince. A very important effort. But the community that we found ourselves working with, had lost all of their land, all of their livelihoods, and were, when our founders happened upon this community, they were living in these precarious cliffs, had lost all of their livelihoods, and were, many of the young people had ended up searching for a better life, going to Port-au-Prince to seek education, to seek jobs, and were returning home extremely sick from wasting diseases, dying very young. And this was in the early 80s, right, when HIV was just being recognized as what it is. And 40 years later, I don't need to tell the stories. There's been many successes. However, what we found in these communities was, first and foremost, we were not coming to share what we thought needed to happen. Our founders were really deeply focused on listening and understanding what are the major needs of this community, who are now displaced and who now have major health crises, as well as challenges in access to education. So this story was taught to me as I started my first days in Partners in Health. And I was taught that, the Latin root word for dignity is worth. And I was taught that, in global development, there's often this, this valuing of who is worthy of being invested in and who is not, who is worthy of having access. That's probably even the wrong way to say that, but who is worthy of fulfilling their right to a healthy lifestyle and, education for their families. And I said, well, this isn't the standard that I'm hearing in a lot of other international and global health organizations. I want to learn more. And I never imagined 20 years later being in a place where I now have the incredible honor and privilege to be working with colleagues, many of whom are Haitian leaders who have started our work in African countries and in Latin America, in Kazakhstan, et cetera, who continue to demonstrate on a daily basis what it means to kind of center the idea that we cannot be artificially socialized for scarcity on behalf of others. We need to be imagining the possibilities of what we would all expect for ourselves and for our families. That sounds, like a lofty, wonderful goal. We know the realities of our world require us to be, planning within systems that exist now. But when I look at what we do and what I think we can all do as practitioners in this space, as relative holders of power, just being in this room, all of us, is that we can intentionally ensure that when we are at tables to develop strategies, to design programs, that those who are closest to and have the assets of their community are at that table and are designing the programs together, and that we are not artificially starting with a budget number, but we are instead imagining what's possible. And I can give some examples. Our dear co-founder, Dr. Paul Farmer, unfortunately died suddenly a few years ago. And he died in one of the places that he had imagined what was possible. He, over a decade ago, we had been working in Rwanda. We were invited by the government in 2004, only a decade after the genocide of the Tutsis, to work with the health system there, after having demonstrated in Haiti that it was possible to work with community health workers and local nurses and doctors and social workers and psychologists to actually change the trajectory of TB and HIV and demonstrate that it was possible to maintain and to cure people from TB, and to ensure that those who were deserving of their right to health had access to antiretroviral. So in Rwanda, we've now worked with the government for about 20 years. And a decade ago, had realized that so much of the movement required the ability to train the next generation of physicians and nurses and public health leaders in this approach to accompaniment and dignity, and of what we call, and the Latin American and indigenous movements have called social medicine for a long time, far before we started teaching it. And Paul imagined on a beautiful hillside in the mountains of remote rural Rwanda that a world-class university could exist. And he made that reality possible because he insisted on not listening to all of the naysayers who said that it's not cost effective. How could you imagine starting a university? You're an NGO that's focused on health and social justice. And what we all continue to learn from his teaching, and what he's instilled in all of us who are leaders, co-leaders around the world, the leaders of each of our country programs are part of our Global Leadership Council, is that we must and cannot have those failures of imagination, and instead we must accept only what we would expect for ourselves and our families. And so I can talk more about what that looks like in practice, perhaps after. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cate. Really powerful anecdotes, and love hearing that about Dr. Farmer. Anyone who's coming in or sitting in the back, feel free. There's actually some seats in front if you want to take those. Feel free. Rakesh, please, over to you.
Thank you. After finishing grad school, I went back home, my hometown, which is Mwanza, Tanzania. And I found myself put in charge of a secondary school with 1,700 students. I was this young kid straight from grad school and in charge of this school. And in my first week there, I was in my office, which was kind of in the middle of the school campus. And I heard this yelling, this shouting coming from one of these classrooms. And there was somebody kind of wailing almost and shouting. So I kind of moved quickly to that classroom. And this was what we call Form 2, like I guess something like 9th grade. And there was a kid on his knees on the floor. There was a young teacher in his mid-20s who was kind of twisting his ear and had a stick and was basically kind of twisting his ear and beating this kid. So I kind of said, whoa, stop. What's happening here? They all kind of looked at me surprised and stopped that. And I said, what's happening? And there was kind of silence. And then some kids kind of pointed to the blackboard. And on the blackboard, the teacher had written the date and had written, get the exact day, but had written July and spelt it with 2 L. And this kid had the nerve to put his hand up and say, the teacher, that's not how you spell July. And the teacher was so angry with that and decided to hit the kid. And I, crazy, I stopped, I said, and I said to the teacher, he's right. July is spelled with 1 L, not with 2 L's, and you shouldn't do this. And I felt good with this intervention on the side of this kid who had clearly no power, and I think the other kids felt good that the person in authority was siding with them. And I felt, this is the kind of thing we should do. I kind of banned corporal punishment in that school afterwards and so forth, and felt pretty righteous and good about it. It's much later that I started thinking, what was it for that teacher? That teacher grew up in a system where he ended up being a secondary school teacher and did not know how to spell July. He had to teach in English. And how humiliated must he have felt? I'm not trying to excuse his actions, but how humiliated must he have felt that he felt the need to take the test? Those teachers, I was this kid coming from having been educated in the US and now in charge of this school. Nobody had even been to the capital city, in many of the teachers, let alone been in the US. And here I'm telling them, we're going to stop corporal punishment. What I'm trying to say is that humiliation works in many directions, including those who do a lot of humiliating. A lot of people who deny people their dignity do it not because at core they are bad people or they want to hurt. It's because that's the air they breathe, that is the water, that is how we learn to be okay in the world. There was a time when my father was rude to this woman who used to take care of our house in Tanzania. And I said to him, why are you being rude to her? Like, you don't need to speak to her like that. And he said to me, if I can't even speak to the maid like that, then who am I? His sense of dignity was predicated on the idea that he had to be above somebody and he had the right to mistreat somebody. That's what made him okay. He was a very simple man. He had very little status. He had very little money. So this is a shred of things. So what I'm trying to say is that I think we live in worlds where to be okay in the world sometimes means you treat people like to be a leader, to be a teacher, be an authority means you have to treat people or rather mistreat people. And that's how systems make us who we are. Now, I think all of us have experienced indignities and being humiliated. Bullying. I know I was bullied at times. The ways we get treated by people in authority, whether intended or not. But as Tom was saying, people who are disproportionately feeling indignities are the poor or in other ways people who have less status. And Tom spoke about a gap between kind of words and action, mission statements and actual program implementation. I think a real gap, a really strategic gap, if the question we are concerned about is the how and how dignity can be something that permeates everyday life, is what I would say between projects and systems. I think we have become good, again, not enough, but I think we've become better at imagining how we can make dignity work in our NGO, in our project, in our community, all of which is important. But we do not grapple with how do we make dignity happen in systems. And yet, the very people who most need their dignity to be affirmed and respected, they do not live inside our project or our one community. The vast majority of them experience teachers, health workers, land officers, court officers, police through public systems. So if we do not have the imagination, the strategic imagination to know how to make public systems where most poor people will actually come, that's where the rubber hits the road. If we cannot do that, in effect, we are saying to ourselves, it's good enough to try to figure out dignity for 1%. And for the 99%, well, maybe, we'll pray. I think our responsibility to the how question you asked, Becca, is to think about how do we make dignity work in systems. Take that teacher who beat that kid because misspelling July. How do you become a teacher in Tanzania or India or Brazil? What is that experience? What are the supports they have? What is the modeling they have? How does it become cool to affirm people's dignity and feel cool yourself? How do you deal with the fact that teacher is probably feeling super anxious because he's not equipped to do his job. How do we make systems think about it? And to me, that means thinking about government and how we work with government. And I think, we just did some piece of research over the last 6 to 8 months through the work I do now, talking to a lot of people in government and ex-government people. And one of the takeaways is that many of us really well-meaning people, including myself, who have worked outside government, we have no clue as to what makes a government bureaucracy tick. I'm not talking about the rules and procedures and policies and mandates. I'm talking about lived experience of bureaucrats. When's the last time you woke up in the morning and exercised deep empathy for that bureaucrat? Even the word bureaucrat is a negative term. Right? And why? These are people, these are public servants who are often squeezed. They don't have the kind of resources. They are pushed from the top, from the bottom. They work in very difficult circumstances, often much more difficult than many of us in NGOs, certainly in this room. And yet, do we show empathy for them? What would it take to make public systems? Do we work alongside people in government to help them think about them? And I think for me, this is a moral question. We should not be satisfied that we have helped make things more dignified in our project or in our community when we know that the denominator, that the scale of the need is much bigger. And I think we are all capable. We have the smarts, we have the access, we have the capability, we have the potential to think about dignity in relation to public systems. I want to close by saying, as my friend Lydia, who's here from Comfort, says, government is made of people. We think of government as, like, when you draw a picture of government, you typically draw, a building, the White House or the Congress or the courts. But it's actually people. And most people, maybe not 100%, but 95% of people respond to an invitation to be able to be their most moral selves, to be able to expand dignity. It's very rare to come across any bureaucrat or any politician, for that matter, who doesn't want to do it. There are few, but we cannot design a world based on the 2 or 3% who really intend build. We have to focus, we have to design the world on the 95%. And when we do that, when we recognize government people as human beings and invite them and say, I know you care about dignity. I know you want to do well in your position. I know you want to leave an amazing legacy. I know, like me, you have a grandmother and you worry about how she'll be treated. I am in this with you. Let's work together so that people's experience of government, people's experience of this service is positive. So even then, if you don't have medicines in the clinic, if you treat people well and help explain to them why we don't have medicines and let's think together, what do we do instead that we don't have medicine? That will be an amazing legacy. 99 out of 100 times, that person will respond, will be grateful for the empathy, will be grateful for the fact that we have affirmed her dignity. And when you affirm the dignity of people as bureaucrats, they are more likely to act in a way that will affirm the dignity of the system they sit on top. Thank you.
Wow.
Can I add a line on this? Just to add, because we work extensively on disasters, and the moment a disaster happens, everyone talks really, really rot about the machinery, government official, even the voluntary sector people. And we never understand that if large number of lives are lost, if large number of houses are collapsed, many of these houses also belong to the people who are in the government or sector and all that. And so you have to, we have seen these cases where you have to, like in Gujarat earthquake and many other places, where you have to go for the funeral of your mother and father. But you have this massive pressure here of the people and the expectations of people. You're absolutely right that at the end of the day, we all are human beings first, and we have to value each other as human beings. And I also feel that when we talk about dignity or the self-respect, I think there's a larger awakening needs to happen for all of us. And there is a lot of work on self. Like one of the things which we're building up on an international level is called Gram Swabhiman, which is the self-respect of the village people. But it's not limited to village. Of course, we'll move to the other part. And I'll just do this exercise for a minute. You know, if all of us are sitting here, if we just close our eyes for half a minute and try to remember a kid in our life who was told by the family or the colony or the society that you're slow. You don't know this. You don't know that. If we send this kid to the market, this kid will sit for half an hour in the market and then come back. Right? A constant something wrong about a kid. Do we remember a kid like this? I'm sure some of us must be sitting here. But do you remember a kid like this in your past or present? How many of us remember something like this? Lovely. 5% of us will become rebellion and will say, we will prove that we are not this. 95% of us will accept because the entire society is telling us. And our comment on that is that both of these reactions are absolutely wrong because the kid was absolutely normal. The kid had his or her own pace. But the society told the kid. And to be honest, I mean, what we see in our work now across, this is exactly what we have done to the larger population of the world. We told them you're powerless. We told them you're poor. Right? We pick up our annual reports and say 100,000 lives changed. And I often ask people that we can't change our own life in one lifetime. How do you change 100,000 lives? It's a good statement, but does it really happen? We say we have adopted 100 villages. We can't adopt a kid. We adopt a kid, we spend our entire life. How do you adopt 100 villages? There's a lot of work on self. I mean, we are going across the country right now and we are saying, we have come to say thank you. You know? And immediately, I'm sure many of us in this sector must have heard this from the community. The moment you say thank you, they'll immediately say, no, but why are you thanking us? You have come from so far. You have taken out so much time. Because they forget that all the roads which we are using are made by them. Our offices, our buildings are made by them. Everything they forget because it becomes a very transactional relationship. Then we ask them that let's talk about what all you have, because we never speak to the people. We only speak what are the problems, what do we solve, what is that you don't have. They actually take 10 minutes to find out first answer, that we have nature, we have tree, we have agriculture, we have buffalo, we have fish, whatever. Third question, if you ask them, and you say, who's poor? In my country, in 330 villages we have done in the last 1 year, almost every single person will raise hand. So on one side, you have this knowledge of your assets, that you have land, you have this, you have that. And the other side, everyone will raise hand that I am poor, because that is the conditioning. And that is what we're challenging in a big way when you're talking about dignity. That's why I thought I'll speak here. Is that people are not poor. Let's understand and change this language and lenses. Those people might be economically weak, but poor is a wrong notion. Poor is a wrong word. I tell them that, listen, I love mango, but I don't know how to climb tree. I love food, I don't know how to grow. I love fish, I can't go in the pond. Am I not poor? So there are different kind of poverty. I think so. The first thing, if we really want to work on self-respect and dignity, we really have to change the language. We have to make a dent on some of these words, because let's tell people that they might be economically weak, but no one is like poor. Otherwise, with just little bit of intervention by a social sector or by a government, how come people come up to a good level? If they're so inherently poor in every damn thing, they're not. So first, value what people have. And then we talk about the concept or the reality of dignity or the self-respect, but first value what people have. That is the core, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. So many fascinating insights. The words we use obviously matter. The labels that people experience matter and can really impact them. And Rakesh, what you said about those who take away the dignity of others are often not those who have been treated with dignity themselves. I thought that was incredibly profound, and also how we can think about this as a system and not just, individual actors. We have time for just one brief question with brief answers for each of you, if that's okay. I'll start with Cate. Cate, oftentimes the leaders in this room are, social sector or nonprofit or funder practitioners. There are trade-offs to everything. You gave a really great example of that in your talk, infrastructure project that was built that ostensibly was improving the community, but simultaneously displaced people in that community and did not treat them with dignity. These things are rarely so simple as to be kind of only moving in one direction. As we think about, funder agendas, team morale, needing to have a business model that works, all of the pressures that social sector practitioners are under, how can we navigate the trade-offs to be pursuing dignity?
Thank you. We've intentionally really prioritized this notion of accompaniment, and we've started documenting what it means. Our Haitian colleagues taught us tout moun c'est moun, every person is a person, and that is seen, that mantra or that proverb is seen in each of the countries where we work in the individual language. And what we've started to do in not only in naming that accompaniment, meaning literally the act of breaking bread together and working shoulder to shoulder is important. We've started in each of the areas of our work across our full complete theory of change, from care to training to our advocacy and influence work, to our evidence generation work, to our government and health systems work, to document indicators that can help us in actually measuring not just the number of patients or the number of people who've been treated, but also the how of it. That how we often gloss over. We often don't ask as partners, how did someone feel about the way they were treated? How did that staff member, actually interface with their patient? How did, our colleague who is embedded within the Ministry of Health work to ensure that, their ministry counterpart was treated with dignity and heard and understood. And so we've intentionally started building performance standards and competencies for our staff and our programs that our funders and partners are not necessarily holding us to, but we're holding ourselves to. And so what that looks like at the University of Global Health Equity is to be able to graduate from the 6-year medical education program. Sure, you have your standards in, your basic biomedical sciences, but you also have your competencies in social medicine. How many community health workers did you learn from? How many home visits were you able to do together, and what were the outcomes of those visits, as just some examples? At the policy level, it looks like not just how many policies are we helping to influence technically, based on our lived experiences in the communities where we're working in public facilities or in community, but what are the actual written words in those policies that actually say the word dignity, that center the rights of the communities and the patients. And then not just in the policy, because we know so many policies get written every day, but how do they actually get costed and then financed and planned and implemented? And those are, we could have a whole session on each of those, of course, but really now having a cadre of health economists who've been trained in our work, who are actually sitting within ministries of health and finance to say, how are we building these costed plans to center social supports to ensure that medicines are, in many cases, medicines and diagnostics aren't always there, but also the necessary food and nutritional and transport that's needed to be able to access that care. How are we costing those and then ensuring that, when you have a one plan, one budget, one report goal of a government to try to align partners, that the governments are at a place where they're able to name that and to hold partners accountable in a different way. So those are a few examples of the how. And we're now 16,000 staff and many others who we accompany in ministries of health, 11,000 of those who are community health workers. We're now retraining everyone in our social medicine practices and principles. And in a few years, we'll be actually measuring if we're seeing changes in overall outcomes across the board. So I look forward to ways that we can collaborate.
Wow, thanks, Cate. Many actionable insights there for some of the folks in this room. And of course, love the shout out to measurement. Anshu, I'd love to ask you, Goonj has been thinking about and working on scale for 25 years. And Rakesh just told us that we need to think about dignity at a systems level. But it strikes me that, having a dignified, respectful interaction with a person is easier when it's happening at a person-to-person level. Harder to understand how that is happening as an organization scales. How do you monitor, track that, ensure that that is happening?
So I think it's not that complicated also, because if it becomes a part of your value system, if it also becomes one of the non-negotiable for you, then it's easy. I mean, there is a constant level, I will not call it fight, but a dialogue with large number of people who work with us, not as a team, but also who bring resources, whether you call it CSR or funding agency or foundation. And to have a conversation and tell people that these are non-negotiable for us, that we will not show this kind of picture, will not do this kind of post. We will never have a lady who has received a sanitary pad, that's one of the larger work of Goonj in India. We'll never have that picture, that lady will never receive that in public, and we will ever print that picture in public, right? Because that's the dignity of that women. I mean, large number of us, when we buy a sanitary pad for ourselves, in many countries, we look for a black polythene or a newspaper to wrap it, because there is a culture of shame and silence. But when you work with the community, you want every single thing to be photographed and published somewhere in the name of motivating more people. How do you do that? I mean, large number of freedom movements in the world have happened without Facebook, and people were still motivated. Those people were motivated forever that way. So I think you have to bring it to that level. It has to become a part of your value system and non-negotiable, as I said. And then when it happens, then if you have 1,000 people today, you have those 1,000 voices to talk to more people. It's not just, so you're not worried about a scale, that if a scale happens, what me and Meenakshi and a couple of our senior colleagues will do. Because we have not taken the thing that the conversation on dignity can only happen through us. No. I mean, you have to live it. You have to, I mean, people need to show it see it in your behavior. I mean, if you go in the community meeting and you decide to sit on a chair and the community sits down, gone. It's absolutely gone. You can't teach your entire, say, team or the community how to practice dignity because you've already demolished it. If you have a different set of utensil for you, maybe nice, good crockery, uh, designer crockery, because you are the CEO of the organization, and the larger team of yours has different kind of crockery because they are in bulk. You've demolished that. Then you can't practice that. So I think it's more of a life of equal. It's more of a life of practice, and if it becomes a part of that, then I don't think it's so tough when you scale it up. So, like I tell you, in my childhood, so because my father was a very upfront government officer, so we worked in the remotest possible areas, and some of the schools. So by the time I did my 10+2, I had changed 7 schools. Yeah, and I remember there was one school where financially we were able to afford a better one, but in that area there was no other school. So you go, and in the morning the kid with his parent used to come and supply milk to us in a container, and after 2 hours the kid used to study with us. We were in the same school. We were sharing tiffin, lunchbox. We were playing together. We were sitting together. So I never had in my life the demeaning words, I would say, of the haves and have-nots. I learned it much later in the life. Because otherwise, for us, it was very simple that we are kid. We both eat. We both bring tiffins. My lunchbox might be a little bit better in quality, and he might bring it in a polythene or something. But he also, that lunch feeds him. That lunch, which is made by my mother, feeds me. And we both play, and our language is that play or whatever we do. And I feel that it's not very complicated to practice that. Then you don't have to worry about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshu. Rakesh would like to address the last brief question to you on the wider sector. Many of us here are practitioners. Some of us are allies in wanting to lift up the voices of local communities whom we do not represent. Some of us are from communities doing important work, trying to uphold the dignity and better life outcomes and possibilities of the communities that we work in or are from, but don't necessarily have the funding and resources to do that and are looking for allies in that resourcing. How can the wider sector really approach creating, as you said, a systems change in our sector to elevate dignity?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I'm not sure I have the best answer, but I want to, even for systems change, I want to start off with our personal example. In the last NGO that I led in East Africa, we had a wonderful vision, mission, value statement. But the fact that all of us, including the CEO, when we had lunch, would wash their own dishes instead of having somebody hired to do that for you, probably spoke more than those things. When a senior government person came to our office and saw that we did not have, even though we had the resources, we did not have four-wheel drive cars that cost $80,000 each, probably spoke louder about integrity and credibility. So I think personal practice does matter for systems change. I'll say three things. I'm not sure they exactly answer your question, Becca, but they might help. One is around measurement. I think outcomes is a really good word. Many people sometimes complain that, and I think outcomes, what does outcome mean? It says, how do I know what is meaningful in the lives of? That's what a health outcome is, or an education outcome is, or a livelihood outcome. And I think if we can learn to integrate our definitions of outcome and then also the measurements and indicators in ways that integrate those things. Right? So how can you make sure that a well-educated child includes maybe a measure around confidence, around self-efficacy, around self-belief, right? I don't think dignity is is something that's opposed to those physical outcomes. And I think if we did that and spoke about them and measured them, I think is the first thing. Two other things. Second is accountability. I come from a field that is sometimes called transparency, participation, accountability. And we all believe in accountability. We believe we should be accountable. We certainly believe that government should be accountable to the people. But our notions of accountability tend to be adversarial. I am going to hold your feet to the fire. I'm going to be a watchdog. What's the metaphor? Watchdog bites you if you sleep. We are going to name and shame. We're going to expose you. That adversarial, anxiety-based, fear-based notion of accountability, I think is anti-dignity. The idea that you will only, and also if we try to peddle dignity by kind of throwing the law or authority at them, like think of the contradiction, you better be dignity or else, I think what instead, if our concept of accountability was relational, as Dan Honig, some of you will know his work, talks about. If you haven't seen his new book, Mission Driven Bureaucrats, please do. This idea that we are accountable, you and I are accountable for this shared purpose. Let's work together, let's help each other to achieve that purpose. That's still about accountability, about achieving that purpose. But it's not that I'm going to watch you because unless I watch you, you're going to go do it wrong. In whichever sector, whichever way we are, I encourage us all to rethink accountability in this way. The last thing I want to make a plug for is politicians. I know we are in the US right now, and that's maybe not a popular thing to do. But we like to really beat up on politicians. Corrupt, useless, they lie. And yes, it's true, a lot of them do that a lot of the time. But I think politicians can be our allies in the work for dignity. Why? Because ultimately politicians need to be liked by people. They need their vote. They need to be seen as working for them. And to me, that is an amazing opportunity to get the politicians to work with the civil servants and systems and say, we're doing all this health system work, or we're doing this education system work, but we're doing it in a way that is not making the people at the end of it respected and honored. How do we do that? Right? Let's work together. And a politician will sometimes get that much faster than a civil servant or an NGO worker. Instead of thinking of politicians as these bad people, let's make them our allies because they may be some of the biggest champions.
Wow, thank you. Round of applause for our panelists. This was a really great conversation. When Tom and I looked at the attendees in this room, we couldn't help but want to have a little bit of audience participation as well. We have so many fantastic practitioners here who can share their own experiences around dignity. And so we're going to do that for a little bit and then open it up to questions. I know we're running a little low on time, but maybe we can hear first from Caroline at Give Directly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, IDinsight and the Dignity Project. It's really humbling to always get into the space where Tom is talking about dignity. And I think for us who are working in this space, we know that we have a past where we have been focusing on human rights, and we have overstated human rights and forgotten the respect and trust that we need to build with communities. As I stand here, my name is Caroline Cate. I'm a VP within Give Directly, and I have come from Kenya. When I think about dignity, the first thing that comes to my mind is that woman. Right now, it's about 5 p.m. in Kenya, and she is on her own. She has to look for food for her children, and she's likely either going to sleep hungry or she got something little that could just be enough for her children. In the meantime, we sit in boardrooms and think about her and define what that life looks like. We define the solutions and we go down and force her because we have formed the difference in relationship between us and them, and defining why we think they can live a better life by taking up our solutions and implementing it. I'm thinking about an officer working with Give Directly right now in Liberia who has to travel on a motorcycle for 3 hours, going to the field and coming back to meet a manager who has been waiting for him to speak to 10 people so we can get our households enrolled in our program. We do unconditional cash transfers. That staff member is experiencing a situation that is presented by power that is created within our offices. And as we think about dignity, do we ever think about that person? I'm thinking about a farmer who today has prepared their land and is waiting for the rains to fall. They don't know when it will come, and maybe when it comes in the forms of a flood. But they have no power to be able to call on anyone to bring the rains or to help the farm to be productive. They know that they are the solution. At Give Directly, dignity is about people being at the center of being the solution and change makers for their own lives, trusting them and knowing that if we went into their communities, we would be a part of the happiness that they're looking after. If we left those communities, they would still be in pursuit of those same happiness that we cannot deliver on a day-to-day basis. Let us just recognize that. As one of the speakers said, they existed before, they will exist now, and they will exist tomorrow. For the time that we have the opportunity to be able to add value to their lives, the best we can do is trust them, give them the respect they deserve, and put them at the center of the solutions of their lives. At Give Directly, we send unconditional cash transfers, no strings attached, and we trust communities and the people who receive their money to be able to make solutions that change their lives. And we've seen those solutions. If you gave us a chance to think through all the solutions that they have, we would never do them any better because we are not the experts. We are not the change that they are looking for. We can only push them to the next level. Let us make our resources go far by enabling communities to be at the center of decision making for the change we are looking for. Let us make them be a part of what we are calling localization. If you think about how we talk about localization, it's all about us. We are always bringing new words and new strategies and new ways of doing things, but we remain the same. The more we change, the more we remain the same, and the more we complicate life for the people who are waiting on us. I can speak about dignity the whole day, and Tom knows we have walked about this, but I have also personally experienced what dignity is about. I wore the first shoe when I was going to high school at the age of 13. That was my first time wearing a shoe. But someone trusted me that even barefooted, you can still go through the rubbles of education and be able to change your life. That is dignity. Nobody judged me. They gave me the opportunity. And I hope that in my lifetime, I can be able to be a part of that opportunity, creating humanity that trusts and believes in other people.
That's it. That's the mic drop. Thank you, Caroline. Let's see. I see Deval here from Dasra.
Thank you. I think, first of all, thank you for the panelists. I think we've been fortunate at Dasra to learn from all of you on stage and your organizations. And I feel while we've had lots of conversations about dignity as it relates to the community, the government, NGO leaders, I don't think we talked as much about donors. And I say that just like the last speaker talked about, donors do not have the same lived experiences of organizations, of community members, of women on the ground lifting themselves and their families and their communities out of poverty. Yet donors sitting here and in other boardrooms across the world are very keen on making the decisions for those communities. And it's funny, just because before starting Dasra, I worked just down the street at Morgan Stanley. And in the for-profit world, you have far greater dignity in investing in leaders. You give them equity, you don't tell them where to put the money, you give long-term support, You provide managerial support, access to networks. You speak about your investments day in and day out to ensure that they succeed. And in the NGO world, it's the exact opposite. And so I do feel like when we talk about dignity, we really need to challenge the funders because they are not operating in a dignified manner. They may have it in their mission statements, they may have it in their vision statements, but they're making decisions about what the community needs. And as the last speaker just spoke, we have no clue of what the community needs. And so one of the initiatives we've started out about 18 months ago was to support as many grassroots leaders across the country as possible with supporters like Goonj and others who would recommend these amazing leaders. We don't have a proposal process. It's a 2-hour conversation on Zoom on any language that the organization wants to speak about. We talk about their vulnerability, their leadership, their community, not their plans of what's going to happen in the next 5 years, because they don't honestly know what's going to happen in the next few years. But in that, we give them 5 years of unrestricted funding and have supported over 175 leaders with close to ₹1 billion till date. And that's just the last 18 months. And I think it's really important to start spreading these stories on how these leaders are actually creating far greater change. I mean, one of the leaders who unfortunately just had to leave is in an area in a state called Manipur. We've had significant amount of violence there, which is not talked about, unfortunately, but in her district, which she's now not allowed to leave, she's had to, and the organization has had to, after this violence broke out, deliver 30 babies because they're not allowed to go to the valley because of various reasons. And so that plan would not have been in place from their side a year ago when they sort of got these funds. And so I do think it's really important. We look at dignity. We look at, like Anshu was saying, we're investing in these communities, and they're actually the ones who are doing the hard work, not the other way around. And I do think we need to challenge funders more than we do right now, because it's just ridiculous. And in sort of how, again, the for-profit world is more dignified to their investors than the NGO world.
Fascinating perspective. Thank you, Deval. Yes, Bill, I think we have from Catholic Relief Services. Love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. My name is Bill O'Keefe. I'm from the Catholic Relief Services, and we have been developing a dignity index, a way of measuring dignity, and have worked with IDinsight and Notre Dame University to do some research in Kenya, in particular, in order to come up with sort of what are the practices that most make a difference in how people feel their experience through the development process is. And we're very proud of that work. It's been funded by the GHR Foundation and is something we're continuing to develop. And I'd be happy to share more about that with people who are interested. Just a couple reflections on the panel. I mean, first of all, it's, God, there's so much like just absolutely intense philosophical stuff going on up there, which I loved. I'm going to come at it from 2 angles. One, I mean, in Catholic teaching and in most religious teaching, dignity is given by God and is inherent in one's nature and one's worth, in one's soul, as I think you said in issue. It cannot be taken from somebody. It cannot be altered. And so our job is really to help people to live in a dignified way that respects their dignity. And but I don't think that sense is necessarily articulated enough and shared and clear by development actors and by donors, for example. And I think you've made some really great points, Deval. Just the second point is this aspect of systems and the dehumanization of systems and the de-dignification that goes on through our political systems, our economic systems, is a massive problem. And I've been spending a lot of time on the Sahel and the issues of conflict there. And a major problem is the distance between the administrative state and the people in the outlying regions who are vulnerable. And it's because their experience of their government is not one where their dignity is respected. The systems of government and the systems of NGOs and the systems of our economic systems, if they don't respect human dignity, we can expect more polarization and toxicity in our society. So this is This is a super important development question at a project level, but I really appreciate how the panel elevated it to look at the more systems level. And it's only going to get harder. I don't know about you guys, but I don't consider my being treated as a digital actor as further humanizing myself. When I call Verizon and I talk to their AI, whatever, I don't feel like my dignity is being respected. I say that not because that's where we're going. And that's, you talk to people attending all these different meetings here, and they're talking about AI and it's going to be great for development. Well, tell me how that's going to help human dignity. We'll see, but we have to keep our eye on that. So thank you so much.
So we're happy to talk about that. That's a really interesting debate. Go ahead.
I am Sister Cynthia, and I'm coming from Lebanon. And this is the first time I attend such meetings. I'm so pleased with what I heard, specifically giving dignity to people. And I believe this is my mission, and this is the mission of every person in this world, whatever the religion is and whatever the race, the color. But I'm sorry, I'm shaking because this is new to me. I want to talk about, I want to discuss further the point of numbers. People have become numbers. And unfortunately, every one of us is responsible of this thing happening, because whether we like it or not, we use numbers daily, either to count people or to count the effects of our missions that we're having, the impact. All these words that we're using these days talk about numbers and need numbers. And investors and donors, for sure, definitely need numbers. And as Deval said, donors are not found easily, and missions are falling apart, specifically giving dignity to people, because it's way more important to create new stuff, to impress people, to release a Facebook video or an Instagram post that would bring you or make you viral, whether it's about cucumber or not. But where is the human in all this? Yesterday we had an interesting talk also about we spent time on nature, which we need to preserve, but who preserves nature? We preserve nature. And I believe the resources should be highlighted, specifically in countries that are categorized as poor countries, as you were saying. And I personally created a system that brings renewable energy. I'm not an engineer. I did not study sustainability. I just had the need for my community, and I dedicated myself to find new ways and alternative solutions. The problem is, who believes in me? First, as a religious woman. Second, being Lebanese. Third, being categorized as a poor or rural country or third world country. And how will I be able to raise my voice in front of people of authority in such big communities facing the biggest companies in the world? So I think this is a cry of every country in the world that is suffering and that has to stand in lines to bring a loaf of bread or to be in a war that you did not decide to be in, that has been imposed on you. And I was raised in a poor family, and I do believe being a sister is challenging because you have to be part of your community. You are not on a higher level. You are not the boss. You have to share the same community things or practices. Sit on the floor with the people. Maybe eat with your hands if this is the culture. So thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you all so much. With respect to your time, I know it's 11:30, and speaking of community, we want to encourage you all to build community here. Please feel free to mill about and meet each other. Once again, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to check out the dignity posters around and the self-assessment.
We've been very lucky to be hosted today by Idealist, and I just want to give them 1 minute to let us know the work that they have been doing and perhaps what this conversation has meant to them.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm sorry, I'm underdressed. I did not mean to attend the event, just to interrupt. Thank you all for being here, everyone for organizing it, for hosting it. I'll be with my back to you. For the sister, I'm so sorry about what's happening this week. I'm from Israel, and just anyway, assalamu alaikum. So this is idealist.org. I think most of you know us as a career site, those of you who have heard of us. I was listening to Tom speak at the beginning about dignity, and our mission, basically the way that we see it, is to help build a world where more people can lead free and dignified lives. So that struck a very strong chord. And the, I think, challenge that all of us face is how to move from intention to action, which also Tom mentioned. And so I just want to tell you one quick thing to sort of put in your calendars. We're going to launch a new program or project next year and try to invite all of you. The idea being to spark more action and collaboration around the world. And one, I guess, mechanism or trick we'd like to use for that. We know how around the world, if you look at a date, any date in the calendar, 3/7. 3/7 is March 7th here, but it's July 3rd in some of your countries, right? The only dates where that's not true is 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, 6/6, right? So we're going to grab those dates, those 12 dates, and we're going to invite you around the world to turn those dates into a monthly celebration of action and collaboration, wherever they are. Do one good thing for something or someone you care about, wherever you are in the world. And the more we do it, the more it will happen. That's the belief. We'll start on 1/1. I just asked Matthew 10 minutes ago, and he said yes, he was willing to do a 24-hour stream on 1/1. So we'll start on 1/1. You'll be invited, and we'll go from there and see what we can do next year. And hopefully you can turn a page on this horrible year we're all having, or some of us at least. So thank you all for coming. You're a beautiful group. You can't see yourselves. I can. So have a wonderful week in New York. And yeah, thank you for coming.